Welcome back to the Vandy Sports Podcast. I'm Joey Dwyer. We're back on the berm in Hoover. Last night it was chaos after Vandy won. Chris Lee and I today with Ryan Schumpert of Rocky Top Insider. Going to preview today's game against Tennessee. Fraternizing with the enemy, although he's a Brentwood guy, so I don't think you guys hate him too much. But Ryan, thanks for coming on. Just what are your thoughts generally about tonight, about what Tennessee has to do to win, about your expectations for it?
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to see how Tennessee handles the pitching staff. They're not going to push everybody up, so it's not going to be their usual series opener of the Stamos opener into Kazi. So I think you'll see a handful of guys get some innings that aren't typical weekend guys. I think you'll see A.J. Russell return to the mound for the first time since the Ole Miss series, week 3 of SEC play. And I expect Nate Snead, who's been one of their best bullpen arms, only threw 22 pitches in the weekend series against South Carolina on Saturday. I think he'll eat a lot of those innings for Tennessee today, whether that's the starter or out of the bullpen. So how they piece that together, I think, will be interesting. And then, just against Vanderbilt's pitching, who it's going to be, because obviously all 3 starters and Futrell gave Tennessee a lot of issues in Nashville 2 weeks ago.
For sure. Russell, a guy who obviously hasn't pitched much this year. What can Vandy fans expect to see from him? What's kind of the pitch mix if he goes?
Yeah, well, it's a high 90s two-seamer. There was a ton of movement on it and a slider that he plays off of that. And, I mean, he probably the most talented pitcher on this Tennessee team. I think the guy he's just a sophomore this year and not a draft eligible, so he'll be back next year. But I think the guy that will probably get drafted highest of any Tennessee pitcher on this staff. So what does that look like for him coming back? He was great real early in the season. Had first some side soreness and then forearm tightness is what it was after he came back. And he was kind of shaky when he came back. So the crispness is what I'm going to be interested to see. But the talent, the high-end stuff, really, really good. And even, if you expect he will throw today, but I don't think it'll be more than an inning or 2 if so.
Sure. It feels like a little bit of a different matchup than it was at Hawkins Field. It feels like Vandy has a little more confidence, a little more edge to him coming into this game. Where's Tennessee at relative to a few weeks ago?
Yeah, I mean, they continue to play well. I think they 13-2, or maybe it was 12-3, what they ended up going the back half of SEC play. Swept South Carolina last weekend, so they're playing well. I don't think, and obviously they want to win, but it's the classic team. They come into Hoover, they don't have a ton to prove this week. They don't have a ton they're playing for. So I think you're going to see a team that wants to win. Just how aggressive Tennessee is with the pitching, I'll be curious to see, because again, it's that back end depth that's been the issue. And I'll be curious to see Tony Vitello's patience. When we talked to him before coming down here, he said the main goal this week was to get more comfortable with the pitching staff, get more guys innings. That's easy to say. If you're in the heat of a game against a rival, are you going to really hold true to that? Are you going to give some guys some leeway? So it's a Tennessee team that's playing well, but obviously a lot of teams come in here playing well to Hoover and don't necessarily play great. So I'll be curious to see what that looks like for the Vols.
Sure. I think something else to monitor, kind of the dimensions of the park. Obviously, a much bigger park than. Maybe not a much bigger park than Hawkins Field, but a bigger park in a lot of aspects than what these teams have seen all year. You feel that could maybe affect the matchup a little bit, because last night obviously had a big effect on the Vandy game. It felt like they were much better suited here than when they played previously against Florida.
Yeah, no, I definitely think so. And that's, in 21, that gave Tennessee some issues here. They played pretty well over the course of the week. Just the home run numbers were way down. And you saw it with Georgia. It's probably Tennessee and Georgia top the SEC in home run statistics. They struggled yesterday offensively. So I think it can matter. I do think this team is a little more balanced in that even though they have a lot of guys that hit home runs, they haven't been super, super home run dependent. But Christian Moore is a guy that I would say he hits a lot of opposite field home runs that aren't necessarily wall scrapers, but typical. You're not seeing a bunch of absolute bombs. I can see a lot of more balls that he hits hard opposite field, maybe staying in the park here. And obviously he's been Tennessee's best hitter all season and certainly been on a tear really the last month of the season.
What was your impression of the SEC Player of the Year award? I know the Tennessee fan base obviously not super happy that he didn't win it.
Yeah, no, I'd give it to Condon. I think it's close. To me, is the fact that before the last weekend, I don't think anyone ever mentioned Christian Moore. It was always Caglione and Condon, and it's weird for a dude to end up winning the Triple Crown in SEC play, not to be mentioned. But his numbers were very, very similar to Condon from a home run and RBI standpoint in SEC play. Condon's on-base percentage was a lot better because he had a lot more walks. So to me, it felt like a bit like a tie, and then you kind of look at what Condon did in non-conference play and just over the course of the full season. I thought Condon was the one who I would have voted for if I had a vote.
Sure. He was a guy who completely lit up both of them, but especially Christian Moore at Hawkins Field really gave Vandy a lot of trouble. Their pitching staff, though, like you mentioned, especially the starters, gave Tennessee some trouble. Yeah. What's kind of been the weakness of this team, and what was Vandy able to exploit that weekend in your eyes?
Well, I think what they were able to exploit hasn't been something that's been super common for this team, which is just a ton of strikeouts. So Tennessee's throwing a football in play, and the Sunday game, the series finale. Tennessee obviously haven't been shut out all year, but it was past just the shutout. They've had some bad offensive performances. Tennessee didn't really hit a ball hard the whole game. I can think of one or two. And then I think that what really has been Tennessee's offensive issue is back of the order, lack of production there. And it was hit or miss that weekend. The Saturday game, I think, was really good. Tennessee got a lot of production. Obviously, Cannon Peebles in the DH spot hit a pinch hit home run to kind of put Vanderbilt away on Friday. So that's something that it's been Tennessee's biggest weakness offensively most of the season, and I'll be curious what it looks like today.
As an outsider, obviously somebody who's familiar with Vandy, seems like they're kind of in the tournament mix now, and they've probably cemented themselves, at least to an extent. What's kind of your perception been of that team throughout the year and how they match up with Tennessee?
Yeah, no, I think it's a good matchup for Tennessee from the standpoint of they have the starting pitching when it's on. It's very good. And I think that's what you have to play with Tennessee. And you're better suited to beat Tennessee with good pitching and average offense, I think. The pitching can be good enough to hold the offense down. So, like you said, it feels like Vanderbilt's definitely safe now. Felt good with 13 wins, but the win yesterday. And I think in that standpoint, too, it'll be interesting to see how Corbin handles some of Vanderbilt's pitching, maybe a little less desperate now, and Bolt maybe being banged up. So, I think Tennessee's a better team. I think they've proven that over the course of the year. But as we saw in that weekend, all three of those games were pretty competitive. Tennessee obviously opened the first two up in late, but I expect a game that's going to be pretty competitive for most of the way today.
Yeah. The thing I think about Vandy at this point is maybe they're trending upward and they hadn't been going to the previous matchup. That's just kind of the sense I got is last night feels like they're playing with a lot more confidence, a lot more edge. I'm interested to see how that kind of matches up with what Tennessee has, where maybe the stakes aren't quite as high.
Yeah, it will be interesting because you're right. It felt like Vanderbilt was reeling kind of going into that Tennessee series and obviously get the one win, but things can go very poorly those first two games in Kentucky. But it does feel like obviously everybody's listening to this would know better than me, but it feels like that series finale win against Kentucky kind of jump-started some things. So you're right. And it was a Vanderbilt team that I felt like the offense had a lot of opportunities in those three games. It wasn't like Tennessee just completely held them at bay, which for a large part was what it was 2 years ago, besides the Friday game and obviously in 22. So I think you're right. It should be an interesting matchup.
Yeah, a year ago I think was one of the more ugly series I'd seen when Vandy went to Lindsey Nelson. It's crazy just to see what Bryce Cunningham did this year versus last year, where he gave up 8 runs or something along those lines in the first inning.
Yeah, you're right, and that was a turning point of the season for Tennessee. Vanderbilt came in there 3 or 4 in the country in the top 5, and Tennessee was 5-10 in SEC play. They just lost a midweek game to Tennessee Tech. They were on the verge of losing that opener, and it felt like the season was all but over. And they win that one, and like you said, game 2, they score 8 in the first inning, and that's what jump-started Tennessee's whole season last year. And came in a big surprise, and we'll see if Vanderbilt can keep on riding this good momentum into the NCAA tournament with a win today.
Sure. I think we've got a lot about the matchup. I want to talk about the rivalry.
Yeah.
Obviously, the rivalry is alive and well. I think you look at the last series, especially the Sunday game, and I don't know what came out of the Tennessee side particularly, but J.D. Thompson spoke to us, and he was talking about Tennessee's loud, they're mouthy, stuff along those lines, and he was giving it back to him. Feels like the rivalry is alive and well, right?
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. I mean, I think it's definitely Tennessee's biggest rival and a team that they really want to beat. And you're right. There was with J.D. Thompson, there was some stuff. I mean, Tennessee that most of it escalated all weekend. And besides that, for Tennessee Vanderbilt, it was relatively tame. I'll be curious to see what that looks like today. And I mean, obviously, the way this matches up, it's a great chance they'll see each other again in 2 days if these two teams go 1-1 the next 2 days. And it would be super interesting there too. So this is a Vanderbilt team that Tennessee definitely wants to beat. I think almost everybody would tell you inside the program it's their biggest rival. If not, if they're not saying it, they're lying and they're trying to save face. So it's a team Tennessee wants to beat, and even though this is a more tame Tennessee team, especially compared to 22, which I don't think is hard to beat. I think it'd be physically impossible to be more outlandish than that team was. They still play with a lot of brashness and confidence at times, especially some of those guys at the top of the order.
It's almost refreshing in a sense to see what this rivalry still is.
Yeah.
In college sports, with everything that's gone on and how much turnover there is, it feels like that doesn't exist a whole lot. And then you look at this week or the last couple of weekends for these teams, and then today, kind of the stakes of it. Kind of refreshing, Ryan.
Yeah, no doubt is, and especially in college baseball where the rivalries that you have in other sports, it doesn't really feel like it carries over. It's a lot more about animosity between coaching staffs or between players, and then you do that on top of the fans. I mean, I don't have to educate anybody here. I'm sure nobody likes Tennessee, but for Vanderbilt to be as good as they were for so long, Tennessee to be as bad, and Tennessee's program to elevate the way they have and have some success against Vanderbilt. I know Tennessee fans relish in it, and I'm sure it makes Vanderbilt fans very upset, and I think that goes into both programs as well as the people that are actually involved in the games.
It's weird. I think you're preaching to an audience right now that might not like you, Ryan.
Maybe I got my Titans polo on, so
he's a natural guy.
Titans people give a little bit of grief for me.
Ryan and I shared a lot of cupcakes in the press box last weekend. If people don't know, the way this guy got his fame, and I know you know exactly what I'm going to say, right?
I do know exactly what you're going to say.
5 hot dogs and a Tuesday night midweek against Queens?
Yeah, 5 hot dogs in 4 innings. It was really 6 hot dogs over the course of the game. So I had one in the first inning, and then the challenge got presented. Won a good bit of money. Got pretty sick after it. So there was some, but the content was good. And when you're in this business, it's all about the content. And Tennessee Queens doesn't create a whole lot of good content. So I had to step up and help myself.
I mean, that's where we're on the berm, right?
That's exactly right.
We're content guys, right?
You don't go to the berm unless you're a content guy.
Did you see the kid walk behind us? He waved at the camera. Content.
Content's king. If we were a couple steps back, he probably would have walked between us and gotten in the shot, for being honest.
Yeah, I mean, maybe that's what we want.
Yeah.
But tonight, I think content's going to be rich, Ryan. I think this is interesting opportunity for Vandy to even the series, and a really interesting opportunity to see kind of what this rivalry looks like, especially after that Sunday game where things seem to get a little chippy, and I think we know a little more chippy than the public maybe knows.
Yeah, definitely. And you're right. I think you made a good point with Vanderbilt winning that last game. I guess it was 9 straight Tennessee to win at that point. It feels like a good chance for Vanderbilt to steal a lot of the momentum back in the rivalry tonight. So you're right. And again, it'll be curious to see. Good chance these teams could play again on Friday too. So a couple games. I think the pitching for both sides would probably be a little fresher on Friday, and that attributes to what we said. If you see more of those Vandy guys who gave Tennessee a lot of issues in Nashville a few weeks ago, if that's the case.
For sure, big game tonight for Vandy. Not quite as big for Tennessee, but I think when these two teams meet, it's always a big game in a sense. So thank you, Ryan, for coming on, and we'll talk soon on the podcast, I'm sure.
Yeah, of course. Sounds great.
Maybe Friday morning.
Maybe Friday morning. That's right.
All right. Talk to y'all later. God bless. Peace.